Slimes. They're pretty cool. You can't really have a fantasy game without some form of slime monster, so I wanted to go ahead and draw a few versions of my own. I have already interpreted Terraria's king and queen slime, so I thought I might use those as a starting point. I thought of them as some form of parasite, infecting a host while slowly digesting them, which is not too far from what they're usually depicted as. Perhaps they even take over the nervous system of their hosts, effectively turning them into zombies. And you know what? I wanted to draw zombies anyway, so why not combine them? Maybe the slimes aren't even directly responsible for these mindless husks. I like the idea of them simply using the opportunity to control them and use them as an easy means of transportation. And who's to say they won't mutate their hosts a little bit in the process? The stronger the host, the further they can potentially reach after all, right? Although I did not want to go too far and turn them into huge hulking brutes. While the idea in of itself is kinda cool, that's not something I wanted to do. Maybe later. And I did not want to limit myself to humans. Animals would of course be affected as well. Like this huge bull turning rabbit trying to make sense of the predicament it found itself in. I imagine it violently stampedes around, still trying desperately to fight off the infection. Trying to scratch that itch on its back. Or how about this old starving wolf that took a few bites of some infected carrion only to find itself even more hungry in the end, as the slime demands more and more sustenance. Or how about this thing? Yeah. Whatever this is. I guess it kinda works. I think. Well, after that I went back to what I talked about in my Terraria video. I wasn't satisfied with how King Slime looked, so I tried again. Maybe he can be the brute I mentioned earlier. Nah, I'm not feeling it. I wanted him to look royal first and foremost, and not necessarily muscular. Perhaps also a little like a general. Maybe that's also where he got infected, during one of his conquests. Design-wise, I wanted him to stay mobile. He's a fairly nimble fighter for his age. So unlike a few other slime designs, he got to keep his legs, and I focused the infection on his torso. I think this is a very different take compared to my first design, and I did like it at first. But after looking through all the other slimes that I've drawn, while yes, they do hit all the marks for what is traditionally considered a slime, something was missing. So back to the drawing board I went. This time I wanted to see what kind of environmental impact the slime infestation would have. Would it simply spread like mold, like its real-life counterpart? Or maybe grow some form of tendrils or roots? Or maybe something even more magical? Would it even affect structures or just organic material? I was hoping these questions would help me narrow down the design. I like the colors of this one the most. But I think visually there's something about these that makes me want to explore further. They kind of remind me of seaweed or algae, which then gave me the idea to look in the ocean for reference. There are all sorts of weird animals in the ocean, so it was perfect. Especially if you look at invertebrates, like jellyfish, or corals, or any of their other distant cousins. And hey, would you look at that? A lot of those cousins are actually colonial animals, just like what I imagine slime to be. A bunch of tiny creatures that all serve a purpose in the colony. One of them would be the core, mostly responsible for reproduction. The other ones would be juveniles, kind of like stem cells, transforming depending on what the colony needs right now. Like these ones, resembling slimes the most, covered in mucus, responsible for digestion. Or these tendrils used for locomotion. Or holding prey waiting for it to be digested. Or how about these balloons filled with liquid or other substances, making them pretty good at protecting the core. I could probably think up a few other members of the colony with different purposes, but these ones should be sufficient enough for now. That way the slimes can handle basic survival, like hunting and eating and reproduction. And most above all, I like the way how alien they look. Just like something out of the deep ocean. Except these ones aren't aquatic. I had a funny idea. What if they're airborne instead? Imagine walking through the forest and something drips down on you from the treetops. You look up and you see a bunch of slimy balloons stuck in the canopies. The slimes up top slowly digest the trees, while occasionally a few of them drop down in hopes of hitchhiking on the backs of an unsuspecting passerby. Who's to say those balloons are only filled with liquid? Why not fill some of them with gas? It would also make for a pretty interesting zombie design. I imagine they don't actually provide enough buoyancy to lift them into the skies, but instead just enough so they float a little bit. It also serves as a perfect weak spot. The zombie is too weak to stand up on its own, so if you pop the balloon, it'll fall down, leaving it vulnerable until it slowly regenerates another one. I also decided to revisit a few of the other designs and make some adjustments to fit them in line with these new slime visuals. I kept the bowl pretty close to the previous design, but I decided to have a little more fun with the starving hound. The slime's already digested its eyes, so now it's using its tentacles as a sensory organ, giving it a pretty alien appearance, and I'm actually really happy with the way this looks. So I decided to apply the same principles to King Slime again. I only tweaked him a little further, by adding the core to his head the same way I did to the dog, and wrapping more tentacles around his mutated arm. I love how his posture combined with his faceless head takes away his humanity. I think that was the cherry on top that was missing from his design. Okay, so I did want to update the queen as well. This was originally supposed to be a Terraria video after all, but to be honest, I've been procrastinating. I told myself I'd redesign all NPCs and all the armor sets, and then do all of the enemies on top of that? I was looking at roughly 400 designs that were still ahead of me. Even if I fully fleshed out one design every single day, it would still take me well over a year to finish this. And I haven't even mentioned the environments. I'll be honest, I didn't really think about it before. It might be a little too much. Halfway through this video, I kinda stopped thinking about this as a Terraria project anyways. Although I don't plan on abandoning it altogether, I might still revisit a few designs, or occasionally do different kinds of fan art. That being said, I hope you enjoyed the slimes, and I hope you'll enjoy future original content just as much. Thanks for watching.